what are some of the biggest or top myths about product management that needs to be busted?
So I think the first one, and this is pretty obvious, is that this idea that more features is better, right? Like, what are we building? What are we delivering? The roadmap, right?
How would you say that they need to start thinking like a business leader rather than thinking about just Jira tickets?
Product management is inherently cross-functional, and if you don't understand that, and you don't understand how to implement it and how to work that way, yeah, you're going to end up in a silo and you're just going to be a Jira jockey or whatever. Driving product success is the core job of product management. Now, what does that really mean?
Where do you see the role of a PM evolving in the next 5 years?
I think there's been an over-focus on the technology, and I think that's going to change. I think it's changing, and people are really looking at, okay, how do we make sure these investments we make give us a return, right? Like, it's not just, hey, we built a super cool product.
Hi everyone, welcome back to our podcast, Everything Product. In this podcast, we talk about different product management concepts, latest technologies, and we host wide variety of industry leaders shaping up the technology space. Today, I'm very excited for the podcast because our guest is Mr. Saeed Khan. Saeed Khan is a product leader, advisor, and a fractional CPO who has helped several big companies build their product teams. He's a strong believer that product management is not just building features, it's more about business management. He worked with several startups and enterprise to shift from a project-driven mindset to a product-driven mindset. In this podcast, we spoke about why product managers are getting stuck into a feature development mindset rather than thinking about business in general. So we are going to deep dive into why so many PMs are getting stuck in this delivery mindset, what needs to change, and how product managers can level up to become business leaders. So if you're someone who is trying to shift into product management, or if you're someone who is trying to move from a product manager to a product leader, this episode is for you. Let's get started. Right. Thank you so much for taking time and spending time with us today.
Yeah, thank you, both of you, for inviting me here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So before we go into a lot of the details, right? If you don't mind, just for our audience to understand you, can you give a quick introduction about yourself, what you do, and what you're planning to do in the future as well? Yeah.
Sure. So let me just say, I've been working in technology my entire career. Started off as a developer way back. I won't tell you how far back, but then I worked actually as a trainer and technical writer in software companies. And then I got into product management in the late 90s. And I've been doing product management ever since. I've worked in both Canada and the US. I'm based in Canada. I grew up here, but we moved to the US in the early 2000s. Worked in a number of companies there, came back to Canada, worked at companies here. And then for the last 7 years, I've been doing consulting, essentially as an independent consultant to technology companies, helping them with product. And what I like to say is I help companies build better products and better product organizations, and the two go hand in hand.
Right. That's great to hear. Actually, before we go into everything, right? I have a question. I've never worked in Canada, but I have a bunch of friends who are from Canada or have been working in Canada. How do you see the biggest difference between US and Canada in terms of product management or like technology in general?
I thought you were just going to say the difference between the two countries. It's never been more different than today.
Too controversial topic.
So okay, so first of all, in terms of scale, so Canada as an economy is about 1/10 of the US, sort of, and that's just across the board. So in terms of technology companies, it's smaller here, right? When I moved to the US, like I was looking at either the Bay Area or possibly Austin, and we end up in the Bay Area. And, it was a good time for a little while anyway. We moved in 2000, which was just before the dot-com bubble bust. So things got rough there, but they also got rough here. I think the big difference, like in places like the Bay Area, you can look for specialists, right? Like you can look for someone who's worked at one of your competitors, down the road. Like when I worked at Informatica, we hired a lot of people from Oracle. And we competed with Oracle, but those people came over a lot. I was people were surprised I was a product manager at that company. He said, "Oh, you never worked at Oracle?" I said, "No." Wow, that's rare. So you can look for specialists. You can look for people who worked in your field, in your domain, in your market. Here, it's more generalist, I would say, because you don't have all the competing companies in one place. But it's changing. Like I would say in the last 10 years, a lot of companies, particularly big US companies, have opened offices here. So Google, Amazon, and then we had some homegrown companies that did well. Shopify is probably one of the best known. So yeah, it's changing. But yeah, this difference of specialist versus generalist, I think, is probably the biggest difference. And then the market size, right? Like in terms of, and then one other change I would say is that, and I think it's a problem everywhere, but I think it's more an acute problem here, is that the lack of really good experienced product leaders is worse here, in the sense that you don't have as many people who've come up and done the work at the lower levels and become product leaders. You have more of it, obviously, in the US, but it's still a problem in the US.
No, that makes sense. I definitely see a huge difference in Bay Area. I worked at different places in US too, and the moment you come to Bay Area, you see the difference in terms of talent, the thought process, especially on the technology products. People are like, I want to try it out. I want to learn like ahead of time instead of us waiting for the company to adopt.
Yeah. One other thing I'll add, and this is just a general business culture issue, it's not as specific to technology, is that Canadian companies tend to be more risk averse than American companies. And, the financial system here I think it's more robust, but it's also more conservative, right? So you don't have the risk taking here that you have in the US. And I think that impacts the kinds of companies and sort of the culture of companies. People, I think, shoot much bigger in the US in terms of what they can sort of aim for. And part of it is because there's more money available there, right? There's more people willing to take risks. The VC industry in the US is much more mature. So I just wanted to add that as well.
That makes sense. Actually, it's a good transition into this one, right? So you have been a product leader, you have been an advisor, you have been a fractional CPO for like multiple companies. So can you share with us like probably one defining moment that shaped your perspective on product management as a career?
Yeah. So, I got into product management a long time ago. So my first product management job was 1997. That's when I got it. So it's been it's been a while. I won't ask you how old you were then, but I had worked in a couple of companies where I had exposure to product management. So there's a company in Toronto called Alias, which is a very successful graphics and modeling company. There's another company called Delrina. I wrote the manual. I was a technical writer. I wrote the manual for that. I saw product management there. The product management at Delrina generally was good, except on the product that I worked on, which was a Macintosh product, and it was terrible. I actually went down there. Here's the manual I wrote for Delrina. But the product management at Alias was really good. They brought in this is back in the mid 90s. They brought in a product manager from Procter and Gamble, right? There weren't a lot of technology product managers back then. And I watched as the company took this really amorphous, monolithic product, technically good, but it wasn't positioned well, it wasn't structured well. And they broke it up. They targeted specific industries. So their two main industries were industrial design and film and animation, and created products that targeted those. And they had a product called the Animator, then a product called Studio, etc. Like, it was really eye-opening to see them do that and then see their success, right? And that was like my first exposure to like product management, like done well, right? And then in my first product management job, which was just a few years later, I worked in a small technology company, and I just thought it would be good. So this is the first product I worked on.
No.
Like, yeah, an actual, thing we shipped. We literally shipped this to people. It's funny. I was talking to someone, a younger product manager. This is not that long ago. And we're talking about something. And I'd mentioned that like, yeah, when I first started, like, we had box product and we would ship, like, literally part of the budgeting and all that was, the shipping costs. And this person, she was like, oh, that's why they call it shipping.
So is it like a CD drive, a CD-ROM or something like that that you're shipping? Like what are you actually shipping there?
In the box, yeah, there's a CD-ROM and there's manuals,
Okay.
printed note.
How to use the product and stuff.
Yeah, the documentation. So anyway, so in that company, that very first company I worked at, it was a very well-run company. It was a small company, but it was well-run. It was very well structured. There was a clear connection between business and product. I was part of the business planning process, as all the product managers were. And I had a really amazing boss. We were part of the marketing department. There wasn't a separate product organization. My boss was just like, he got it. He understood product. He understood marketing. He helped us achieve what we wanted. And that connection of product and business, that very explicit connection, just was ingrained because we knew why we were doing things, right? It was very clear. Like weren't just building things, like, which is what a lot of, product managers are focused on. We were doing it to achieve specific business results, and the other activities, the marketing activities, the sales activities, etc., were all connected. We could see that. And then we could see the problems that were happening as well. Like maybe some marketing programs aren't working and that's not generating leads, which is not going to convert, and we're not going to get to our business goals, etc. Like all of that holistically was clear. So yeah, that's probably the most pivotal thing, was having that clarity and then maintaining that over the years.
Yeah, I love that thought actually. I mean, let's say if someone is starting a startup, okay, and if they want to run everything by themselves, which basically means all of the things that you talked about, they're managing everything by themselves. In a big company, I know it won't work right now. There is like product managers who are probably looking at customer problems, building the products, launching the products, testing out metrics, etc. We have product marketing managers now who are specifically responsible for the marketing front, and they'll be collaborating with the corresponding PM. And we have like product operations managers who are responsible to like shipping it to the customer, making sure they're using it right, gathering the feedback, etc. But a holistic view is what I'm hearing that used to exist like back in the time.
Yeah, but a holistic view doesn't mean I did everything myself, right? Like I mean, we had a finance group that was great, and they were providing us the financial data, right? We had a marketing org, and they were doing their work, right? We had obviously engineering, we had customer support, we had people who were out in the field. Like there was a broad set of people, but I had connections to all of them, and they had connections to me, and we all were aligned on what we were trying to achieve, right? There wasn't this siloed sort of organization, right? It's work. It doesn't just happen for free, but having that overall view is great. And I think that's a problem today in a lot of product management, is that, like, product management is inherently cross-functional. And if you don't understand that, and you don't understand how to implement it and how to work that way, yeah, you're going to end up in a silo and you're just going to be a Jira jockey or whatever. It doesn't help.
That's true. Yeah, that's one of the things for product managers, right? They need to have the end-to-end vision for the product rather than just thinking about one specific feature that they're launching or one specific customer problem that they're solving, rather than having the holistic picture. Yeah.
Yeah, I think having the big picture is very important. I had one follow-up question. Like, I'm sure, like in the last like 28, 30 years, you might have seen how the product management career grew, and you might have heard so many myths about product management, right? Like, what are some of the biggest or top myths about product management that needs to be busted?
Okay. So we could have a whole conversation on this, but I'll pick a couple. So I think the first one, and this is, pretty obvious, is that this idea that more features is better, right? Like, what are we building? What are we delivering? The roadmap, right? Yes, you do need to build things. I mean, you need to build things because you need to sell things. But this over focus on building and delivery, I think, is a problem. And unfortunately, a lot of it has actually been amplified by product evangelists themselves, right? Who have talked about discovery and delivery as being the job, right? It's like, no, like that's part of the job, but that's not the whole job. right? I ask people, like when I talk to product managers, I say, what's the job of product management? Like just in the simplest terms, what's the job of product management? And so I'm going to ask you guys. I'm going to throw it back to you, and I'll put you on this spot. What's the job of product management? In just the simplest, like boil it down to like the simplest thing you can say.
Define a vision, understand the customer problem, build a product, launch it, and iterate.
Okay, less words. Srina, can you say it in less words?
I mean, solve customers' problem.
Okay, so those are part of it. I think both of you have part of it. The way I describe it is the job of product management is to drive product success. End of story. And the reason I say that is like, what's the job of marketing? Marketing is to drive marketing success, right? Sales is to drive sales success. Everybody is trying to drive success in their context. And success is dependent on the company context, right? Like in the early stage of a company, you might be looking just at market awareness and you're just trying to get a few customers, right? Later on, you might be looking at growth. Later on, you might be looking at profitability, right? It really depends on the context, but driving product success is the core job of product management. Now, what does that really mean? Because we don't sell, we don't market, we don't build, right? So what are we doing, right? We are creating the conditions and driving the process inside the company and then doing work outside as well to drive those other groups to success, right? Like if I'm working with engineering, and let's just use that as an example, I want engineering's investment to be maximized when it gets to marketing and sales. So, engineering can build. Engineers are amazing. Engineers can build the most sophisticated things. But if half the time they're building things that no one cares about, whose fault is that? Like that's on us. So what we have to do is understand that and say, okay, what is this? What is the situation that we need in order to do our job? Because everybody is doing their job. Marketing is going to do their job. Sales will do their job. So I think this idea of the building is a problem. Like focus only on building. One of the things that I did, and I look back as like, what's something I did that wasn't building a product that made it successful? And what it was is in one company, we restructured the pricing and packaging of the products we had. We had lots of products, lots of SKUs. It had evolved over time, and it was really complex. I spent time with my manager. I spent time with finance. I spent time with sales, and we simplified it. And some sales reps got upset for various reasons, but the next quarter, we had a 25% increase in revenue, literally the next quarter. And we didn't change the product. There was no code change, like maybe some license changes, but that wasn't really product changes. Like those are the kinds of things that product managers need to understand. Like it's not just about building and delivering and shipping. So I think that's one big, huge myth. Another one we can talk about, and I think this is a whole separate topic. And I know you've done a lot of discussions on AI, but I think right now the whole AI discussion and that AI will replace product management, I think that's a huge myth that has to be busted. I mean, if all you're doing is, Jira tickets and shipping stuff, then maybe yes, you can replace most of that with some form of automation. But if you're really thinking about business, you're thinking about how to compete in the market, you're thinking about, how to change the game with your competitors, et cetera. None of that data is in an AI model. It's out in the world, it's in your company, it's in people's heads. And it takes time to do. So I think that those are a couple of myths. There's probably a couple more I could think of, but I'll stop.
Yeah, I think that one thing which resonated me was the first thing that you said. In my experience, one thing which I've learned is at one point of time, we were trying to show value to deliver more and more features to the leadership, which what happened was it made our platform very unstable. Whatever was working before was not working because we were trying to make it more complex by introducing more and more features without focusing on stability to make sure at least the existing works. What happened was the users who were like using the product currently, we saw a sudden dip in the usage because they were not even getting the functionality and we are adding on icing on the cherries. So I think that's pretty important as a PM. Like make first existing things work before you go about adding and adding and adding.
Absolutely. Like just be clear, what problems are we really solving, right? And And the goal is not to just keep finding more problems, right? Like, yes, you want to address market problems, but you have to balance that with what are we trying to achieve as a company? And so just continuing to add more features, making things more complex isn't going to work in the long.
I want to get it deeper into this topic as well, Saeed. So I was reading your article and I loved it as well. So this is the article where you specifically talk about like product management is business management and why is everyone forgetting that? I want to quote this statement also, right? In that you basically tell, in tech, we drifted away from the business focus, and this is being it's pulled by like delivery focus methods such as agile and lean, and a focus on the technology versus explicitly leveraging technology to drive business success. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that that's probably one of the key lines in that article. So I'm gonna take us back a bit. So I mentioned when I started product management in the late '90s, right? I had the kind of, I guess, to start product management right at the beginning of the internet boom, and that was a huge technological shift uh, in how the world was going to work, and it parallels a lot of what's happening now with AI, right? Like people are talking, oh my God, all these changes in technology and all these things will happen. And back then there were job postings for internet product manager, and like people were like, oh, you have to know the technology. And I'll say internet technology was much simpler than AI in many levels, but still, like people had this view that it was all about the technology. And I was working in a company that was making Java products primarily. That was their main business. Although, well, that was the new business. We had other products. I held up one of the boxes earlier, right? But they were developer tools. They were tools for developers to build applications. And so there was this whole thing, but oh, everything's going to change and so on. And yes, things did change. We even had back in the late '90s an online store for some of our products, and you could order and download the products. Like that was brand new back then. But the technology wasn't the challenge, right? The challenge was understanding what impacts this technology was having on people, on businesses, on companies, and then how we could help that, right? So I mean, like until we start doing things differently, we're always building products for people, right? People in companies, right? It's still the people. People use these products mostly. So like you have to understand the people, and the technology is the enabler. The technology isn't the focus. Like, yes, we were a Java company and Java was a huge thing. And, people like we would go to huge Java conferences and so on. Like it was a cool place to be. But in the end, the problems were people problems, right? The problems were process problems. And so if I bring that forward to today, like all this talk about AI, I mean, to me, I see so many parallels, right? That it's the same story all over again. Yes, AI is going to change things. Like I use, AI tools just for the work that I do, but I use it and I apply it on the same kinds of problems I was doing 2 years ago or 3 years ago, or, whatever, before all these generative tools came out. So I think people have to realize that like it's the world we live in, it's changing, and technology will help us, and technology will change certain aspects. Like there's certain jobs that'll go away, but there's new jobs and new opportunities and new things that will happen. And then we'll have to apply that. I had a joke once. I said, what does SaaS stand for? Like the acronym SaaS, right? And it stands for Same Application Available as a Service. Because like all these SaaS applications used to exist, most of them before SaaS, right? Salesforce was just Siebel or whatever hosted in a thing, right? Like it's not like they did anything different. Yes, now they're doing new things, 20 years later. So that's the perspective I have. I think, and there's a quote you might have heard. I don't know who said it, but we overestimate how much technology will impact us in the short term, and we underestimate how much it'll impact us in the long term. And I do think that's true. I think looking back like 25 years ago, like, wow, these iPhones, no one could have predicted that, right? And you have a supercomputer in your pocket. That's amazing. But guess what? What are we doing? We're sending text messages, and it's not like suddenly the world has, we're all doing supercomputing.
Yeah, yesterday I was chatting with one of my friend who is an engineering leader at Microsoft. We had like a similar discussion. No, AI is coming. I asked him like, how is it impacting your whole hiring and all? And he was saying like, I mean, definitely they see some impact, but he also agreed it's not going to completely replace all engineering jobs or all PM jobs because I mean, it's going to bring some efficiency for sure because of these tools, but who is going to go and to talk to customers? Who is going to get all the feedback? Who is going to do all that thinking? Just because coding is one thing, without even understanding all that, how do you even go and code?
Yeah.
So that's what he was saying, which is
Absolutely. So here's the thing, and I was listening to a podcast I did, like it turns out it was in 2019. I was listening to it last week, and I said something in that podcast, and I was like, oh, I have to say that here as well because it's even more true today. And what I said was, and the line is that it's never been easier to create software, right? Like this. And I think this is true every day. Every day it becomes easier and easier and easier to create software. And what that means it's never been more important to understand the world and the market and who you're building for. Because the next person, it's as easy for them to build something. And the next person, it's easy for them to build something. So if you build something without a lot of market understanding, it's very easy for them to look at what you did and make it better. But if you can actually understand the market and get a deep understanding and then apply that, all of a sudden it becomes harder for them because they can't just copy your features. Like it's not just the features, it's a lot of the underlying thinking that they don't know. And it's your go-to-market, right? It's your positioning, it's your messaging, it's all these other things besides the technology. And I think just to get back to the question earlier, like I think that's going to change. I think more emphasis on those things will have to be true because like where is your IP? Your IP is no longer your code.
It's true. I mean, I love the way you said that. Like, it's the same products being built over and over again, probably with the new technologies. That I can totally see that because in the past, probably people are using Java. They might be using a new language or new tool to build it, but they're still ending up solving the same problem. Accounting, taxes, or like you said, messages. It's been there forever, but it's just probably getting slightly better over a period of time.
Yeah. Hey, we have animojis now, so that's amazing, right? That I mean, I think about it, and I tell my kids this, right? Like we have more computing power in our house, okay, iPhones, laptops, you name it, than probably entire universities had 30 years ago. Like we probably do, and yet we're not doing crazy stuff. We're just doing the normal things we do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, I want to go a little bit more deeper into like product managers and how they can get this mindset right. Let's imagine a new product manager, probably who's coming into the business, into this business world. Typically, what people learn in their courses, or typically what people learn when they talk to people, is probably the definition that I told. Hey, you should be able to like set a vision, you should be able to set the strategy for the product, work on the backlog, make sure your engineers have the right tickets that they need to work on, launch it, iterate with the metrics. How would you say that they need to start thinking like a business leader rather than thinking about just Jira tickets?
Yeah. So I think there's two ways I would answer that. So the first one, and I think this is the most important one, is that where's their product leader, right? Their product leader, a big part of their job is to create that environment so that they can function well, right? Like you can't come into a company that's a feature factory as an individual contributor product manager and start talking about business goals and strategy and this and that when they're like, well, you were hired to like work with this development team and just focus on delivery, right? Like that's an uphill battle that you're probably gonna, not win. So that's the first thing. There's a guy, David Marquette. I don't know if you heard of him. He's an author. He wrote a book called Turn the Ship Around. And then he wrote another book called Leadership is Language. And he was a former submarine captain. So the first book was about his life as a submarine captain and how he sort of overcame certain challenges. But there's a quote, and I'm not sure which book it comes from, but he said, that the job of an individual is to be the best version of themselves in their role. And I'm paraphrasing a bit here. But the job of a leader is to create a system where those people can be the best version of themselves, right? So essentially, setting up the organization so that people can excel, right? And and so the leader is the one who's setting the context and the tone and making the system so that others can do what they need to do. So I think that's the first thing in a company is that if you want to be in a company that is, connects business and product in a very clear way, and there's real advantages to doing that, the product leader should be enabling that. They should be working with other leadership in sort of structuring the organization. If you come to a company where product management is a silo, you're going to have a tough time. So that's one. Now, having said that, if you're an individual contributor product manager, yeah, do your job, right? Like do whatever the job is that you need to do, but start pushing at the edges, right? Like go make friends with sales, right? Like meet your salespeople, get to know them, particularly in a B2B company, understand their challenges and build relationships so that when they come with the inevitable sales special, it's not just a demand to like the faceless product management team. You've met them, they understand you, you understand them better. Maybe they give you a heads up, right? Before coming and making demands, right? Like that's one thing. Get to know your marketing team. Like the marketing team is the first group that you're going to impact, right? Because they're going to have to launch the products. And the last thing they want are surprises. Like, hey, you've been working on that thing for 6 months. How come you told us a week in advance? Like, why isn't there clear communication? So start getting to know these groups and start working cross-functionally and then start understanding the business, right? Like people talk about managing stakeholders, but managing stakeholders is really not the right term because you're not managing them. They're probably managing you, but the reality is you want to collaborate with them. You need to understand their context. You need to understand what they're trying to achieve. And since product management is upstream of most of this other work, right? Like product does its work, then feeds that into engineering. Engineering creates products. Marketing gets its work. Sales is sort of the most downstream team, except for maybe support or success teams. But understand that dynamic, get to know them, and then try and create kind of a picture of the business. Talk to finance, right? See if you can get some finance numbers, right? See if you can understand the sales funnel. Like there's lots of little tactical things to do. Start somewhere, like where you're most comfortable, and then work outward from there. So I think you can do some of it as an individual, but it's really incumbent on the product leader to create an environment where you can actually take that and apply it and be successful.
Yeah. Actually, I can totally relate to that. I feel like I do that from time to time too, where you get stuck into your current work, where, hey, it's like I have these initiatives, I have these OKRs that I need to deliver for this quarter. You just get stuck into that loop and then continue to like go with the products. I have one-on-ones with all of my partners. I would say like operations leads, onboarding leads, etc., just to understand their pain points and stuff. But over a period of time, it just becomes like, hey, what do you have in mind? Like, is there anything else new coming? Rather than thinking about their biggest pain points at that point of time, or what are they envisioning down the line that the product should do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
sorry, just another suggestion is like, if you're an individual contributor product manager, talk to your product leader. Like if your product leader isn't doing the things like I described, talk to them and say, hey, can we do this? This would be really helpful if we did that, right? Maybe get some of the other product managers on board and go as a group and get your product leader to sort of open their eyes a bit more.
Yeah.
Just change happens over time. So just think about it and figure out how to get those positive changes moving forward.
I love that. Sorry, Srinath. I love that thought as well, Syed. Product leaders are someone who sets the right, what do you say, setup or the cultures, so that the person who comes in will be able to do the best that they can do, rather than setting a direction to say, okay, this is exactly what you need to do. Enable them to do the best that they can do. Yeah, I love that statement.
Yeah, I've seen something like I worked in some companies where VP was setting that culture and it was very clear for all the people down to what exactly needs to be done. And I've also been seen in a place where that culture was not there, and we were like running for problems, trying to solve different problems without having clarity on the vision. So that was missing. And I really like your thought process on developing that relationships, being more cross-functional. I think understanding from whole business standpoint and not just your product or feature. One thing really which helped us in the past was we had some good monthly lunch and learn informal roundtables with our customer facing teams and all key stakeholders involved in the product managers, engineering leaders who were supporting the product, and some of the finance folks and those folks. That I felt really bought. It's not just about work, but also hearing from there what they are facing and trying to understand problems what still are. That I felt like not only helped in like, oh, give me customer feedback versus more of an informal conversation, which I felt was very important. I'm trying to practice that as much as possible um wherever I work now.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And the lunch and learn brings back some memories because we used to do that in companies I worked at. And you're absolutely right. It's listening to them and having those conversations. People want to be heard, right? People want to be they want to contribute. They have information. I think setting up feedback loops, like really, sort of strong feedback loops is important. So one thing I recommend, and I think Lunch and Learns is a good one. Another one I recommend to the clients I work with is to set up what I call cross-functional meetings. And so like every 2 weeks, let's say you get middle level people. So it's like product manager, maybe a support manager, a dev manager, someone from sales, maybe it's a sales engineer, etc. Right? You get this group together. Maybe they're all focused on a product or product line, and they talk about operational issues, right? And the goal is that everyone's doing work, everyone's focused on their success, but there's this interdependency. And so what you want to do is try and get people to speak out, tell what's going on, and then find places of alignment and misalignment. And I did that with a client, and they implemented it. And the head of product said to me, he goes, okay, look, I'll set this up, but this is another meeting now that people will need to attend. I need to know why it's valuable because I have to sell it to them. And I explained kind of the logic. And he goes, okay, what's your success metric for this? And I thought, wow, that's a good question. No one's asked me that question before. And I said, the success metric is no surprises. And as soon as he heard that, he was like, oh yeah, because they had a lot of surprises come up. Like support comes up and says, this suddenly happened. How come we weren't aware of this? And she goes, oh, we were aware of that. We forgot to tell you, but it should only happen very rarely. Or some marketing wasn't aware of something going on. Like, wait a minute, why is this happening? No one told us. So this idea of no surprises, I think, is just a very easy way for people to go, yeah. And I asked him, I asked him like 6 months or 9 months later, I go, how's it going? He goes, we've only had one surprise. And I was like, okay, that's pretty good. Like, like after 9 months. So I think these feedback loops are really important, staying in alignment. I just assume everybody wants to do good work, and the more roadblocks we can remove from them, the better.
I have one follow up on this. What's the most common mistake that PMs would make when interacting with this customer facing teams? Because I have one example, at least from my like early stages of experience, where I was trying to overcome it. That I mean, obviously, customer facing teams are coming sometimes can be the loudest voice in the room, and prioritization cannot be just based on loudest voice in the room. We need to look at whole business. So that's one of my learning experience. But I was love to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think there's two things that come to mind, actually. So the first one is you have to speak their language, right? Like a lot of times product managers will come in with a lot of product language. Oh, we're going to do an MVP and then we'll run some experiments and we'll do that. And it's like, okay, great. Like who cares, right? Like sales doesn't care about that, right? Sales wants to know, what are you doing? When is it coming? And how is it going to help me meet my quota? Marketing doesn't care about that, right? Marketing needs to know what's coming and what do we have to prepare for and how does this fit in with everything else, et cetera. So I think understanding what they're looking to achieve and speaking their language is one, because they'll hear you if you use words that they use, right? So like I say to people, like, for example, the word experimentation might be a really cool product word, but if you tell a business executive and talk about, we're going to run a bunch of experiments, like they're like, oh, like when people think of the word experiment, they think of a chemistry lab and things blowing up and whatever. Like it's not a word. If you use due diligence, or you do even use things like we're gonna try and reduce the risk on this, suddenly the context is different. Okay, who's going to argue with reducing risk? So like understand what's important to them and why, and then speak in their language. That's the first one. And then I think the second one is I think you kind of touched on it, like only talking about deliverables, like commitments, like this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to commit. Like, yes, absolutely. Like those are things that are important, but help people understand the why, right? Like you're doing work for reasons, right? So, hey, we have these objectives, right? We're trying to reduce churn, or we're trying to increase adoption, or we're trying to compete against this other company that's been eating our lunch in these kinds of deals. So this is what we're focusing on, and this is why. I think the why is really important, because if you can align on the why, then how you do it becomes less contentious, right? If you just talk about what you're going to do, then everyone has their own opinion. Oh, why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you doing that? And if people don't agree on the why, that's a really good discussion to have, because that means they have a different set of priorities. And now you can figure out, okay, why? Why is that not happening? Why are their priorities different? Is there some miscommunication, etc.? Right? So this idea of alignment and having clear priorities is really important. And then the word prioritize comes up, right? Like, what does prioritize mean? Like, oh, we're prioritizing features. Well, no, you shouldn't be prioritizing features. What you should be doing is prioritizing objectives. And then the work falls out of that. So I think those are two things that mistakes that people have when they talk to other groups.
No, really love your thought process there. I want to switch gears slightly to the future of product management. I know there are a lot of questions out there for not only PMs, for a lot like maybe aspiring PMs or senior PMs. Like, where do you see the role of a PM evolving in the next 5 years?
So the honest answer is nobody knows, including me. But I'll give you my opinion. So I'm actually going to read from a Quora post I wrote, and I just looked it up. And the question was, what is the future of product management? So it's exactly the same question. And this is 6 years ago I wrote. And so I'll just read a short part of it. It says, first of all, I'll be frank, I don't know what tomorrow will look like. And I'm not sure, I'm not the only one here. So the things I said back then, and I looked it up before we started talking, and I was like, yep, I still agree with this. So the first one is increased focus on product success versus technical success. I think there's been an over focus on the technology, and I think that's going to change. I think it's changing, and people are really looking at, okay, how do we make sure these investments we make give us a return, right? Like it's not just, hey, we built a super cool product. I think the next one I wrote was better and more standard understanding of roles and responsibilities. I think product roles have been like a wild west, like you look at the job description, then you look at what the actual job is, and there's no relationship between them. Just having clarity on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve, and what the people are. I think that'll happen. I think that's just a natural evolution. It shouldn't be, a huge problem, but like I think product suffers from it immensely. Another thing I wrote was formal education programs around product management. So this is 6 years ago. And since then, there have been a number of formal, like university level programs that have come out in different universities. I'm drawing a blank on some of them, but like there's one on the East Coast. There's a couple here in Canada. Queen's University has one at the master's level. So I think before, everything was like pragmatic marketing or product school or something, and that's fine. But how much can you learn in 3 days, right? I think that if product management is as important as we claim it is, then you have to have more than a 3-day course to teach it, right? Like there's got to be more depth. So 6 years ago, the tool space was very different. We've got lots and lots of tools now. I mean, it's quite a different world. And then I made a mention of AI in this. I said, these tools will leverage new technologies such as AI, machine learning, automation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So Yeah, like I think all those are true. I think that this shift to a more business focused reality is true. I do want to mention one other thing, and so Claire Vaux had a talk at Lenny's Summit in the fall, and the talk was titled "Product Management is Dead." And then she kind of articulated her view of product management. She said that there's going to be this product design engineering kind of combination, and this superhero will do these amazing things, and uh, I just was shaking my head. Like, to me that makes no sense at all. Like, the expertise of engineering, the expertise of design is very different. It's very distinct. People go to school, like people spend years in school understanding design, right? People spend years in school understanding software engineering. Like, AI will suddenly change that? I don't think so. I think software development is going to change because of new tools in AI, but I don't think the three will merge. I think what will happen is it'll open new opportunities and it'll free up people. I think the UX people hopefully will take on some of the work they should have been doing, the product management basically hogging in terms of design work and things like that. But I think product management will become much more business focused, and sort of hopefully AI will free up time to go do more market research and market understanding and bring that in to make better decisions, because that's really fundamentally what product management does a lot of.
Too. And I bunch of us like really hate writing Jira tickets, updating them, like making sure that process, etc. If all of that can be automated with tools, and if we can actually focus on the customer, that's the best.
Absolutely. Like, if there's something you want AI and automation to do, is all that grunt work. Like, why are people spending time doing that?
Yep. No, this is great, Sayed. Yeah, thank you so much for spending time with us. Before we close the pod, just one last thing, like where can people find you, and if people want to reach out to you, like where can they connect with you?
I think the best place is connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty vocal on LinkedIn. I post product information and other things on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty responsive. So I think that's the best way. And I like LinkedIn because when people reach out to me, I can see who they are. Hopefully, you know, if you're a product manager, I'm absolutely gonna respond to you. If you're selling something, maybe I might not respond to you, but it's a good way to sort of connect with me.
This is great, Sayed. Again, thank you so much for taking time. I learned a lot. Loved the conversation. Yep.
Yeah. No.
Yes.
Good.
Thanks, Saeed. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, both of you.